Eleanor reversed her pristine white G-Wagon directly into the hood of my rusted Honda Civic while making dead-eyed contact through her rearview mirror. No brake lights, no hesitation. Just decided the asphalt occupied by my commuter beater was rightfully hers. When I stepped out to inspect the crumpled metal, she immediately dropped to the pavement, clutched her neck for the gathering crowd, and hissed at me. "People like you are why my husband pays for premium lawyers, sweetheart." So I stayed quiet. I stayed quiet so hard, I completely forgot to mention the federal badge in my wallet or the 4 discrete 4K dash cams hardwired into my vehicle, recording every agonizing second of her Oscar-worthy performance. What followed was a 72-hour legal bloodbath, 3 felony charges for federal insurance fraud, and a $2 million civil forfeiture that drained every last dime from her pristine little life. I watched her get shoved into the back of a squad car while sipping my lukewarm gas station coffee. Best Tuesday ever. But to truly appreciate the sheer, unadulterated beauty of Eleanor's spectacular downfall, you need to understand the exact mechanics of the trap she willingly walked into. You see, I am not John Wick. I am not some action hero who jumps out of helicopters. I am a 34-year-old forensic accountant who happens to carry a badge for the Federal Bureau of Investigation. My entire job consists of sitting in a windowless room, tracking wire transfers across international borders, and proving that wealthy people are lying on their tax returns. Because my day job involves dealing with the most arrogant, entitled white-collar criminals on the planet, I have developed a very specific threshold for human garbage. And because I occasionally have to conduct surveillance in neighborhoods where a government-issued black SUV sticks out like a sore thumb, I drive the ultimate camouflage vehicle. My car is a 2009 Honda Civic. Its color can only be described as fading despair gray. The hubcaps are mismatched. The rear bumper has a bumper sticker from a band that broke up 15 years ago. It looks like it is entirely held together by duct tape and the hopes of a struggling college student. But underneath that pathetic exterior is a very different story. The engine is tuned to perfection, the tires are pursuit rated, and most importantly, because I have trust issues and an obsession with documentation, the car is rigged with a custom surveillance system that would make the National Security Agency blush. I have wide-angle, high-definition cameras mounted in the front grille, the rear license plate frame, and the side mirrors. I have dual cabin cameras. I have omnidirectional microphones tucked into the door panels. Everything runs off a secondary deep-cycle battery hidden in the trunk, and the footage is constantly beamed to an encrypted cloud server in real time. My little gray trash can is essentially a rolling panopticon. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I had taken a rare half-day off to run some errands. I was wearing faded jeans, a plain gray t-shirt, and a pair of worn-out sneakers. I looked exactly like the kind of guy you would expect to step out of a battered 15-year-old sedan. I pulled into the parking lot of one of those absurdly expensive organic grocery stores. You know the kind. The place where a single avocado costs $6, and the aisles are constantly clogged with people wearing yoga pants that cost more than my monthly utility bill. I was just there to buy some specific imported coffee beans that my supervisor likes, a small bribe to smooth over the fact that I had accidentally broken the office coffee maker the week before. The parking lot was a war zone of passive-aggressive entitlement. People driving $90,000 luxury tanks were aggressively fighting over spots that were 10 feet closer to the entrance, so they wouldn't have to walk an extra 30 seconds to go buy their organic kale. I was cruising down the main aisle at a crawling 5 miles per hour, patiently waiting for a gap. Ahead of me, an elderly woman was slowly loading groceries into the trunk of her sedan. I stopped, put my blinker on, and waited for her to finish so I could take her spot. I was perfectly centered in my lane, leaving plenty of room for traffic to pass in the opposite direction. That is when Eleanor entered my life. She came tearing around the corner in a pristine white Mercedes G-Wagon. For those unfamiliar with the vehicle, A G-Wagon is essentially a military-grade armored personnel carrier designed for the German army, which has been inexplicably co-opted by wealthy suburbanites to transport purebred labradoodles to the groomer. It weighs roughly 6,000 pounds and has the aerodynamic profile of a brick. Eleanor was driving this monstrosity down the wrong side of the aisle, entirely ignoring the giant painted arrows on the asphalt. She saw the same parking spot I was waiting for, but because she was approaching from the wrong direction, she was blocked by my car. Instead of waiting or realizing she was driving against the flow of traffic, she pulled her massive grille up until it was roughly 3 inches from my front bumper. We were nose to nose. She laid on her horn. It wasn't a quick, polite beep. It was a solid 10-second blast of pure auditory rage. I looked through my windshield. Through her glare-reducing, perfectly tinted windshield, I could see her. She was wearing oversized designer sunglasses that covered half her face, a perfectly tailored athleisure outfit, and she was aggressively chewing gum while waving her hand at me, gesturing for me to put my car in reverse and back up out of her way. Keep in mind, there were 3 cars stopped directly behind me. I literally could not back up even if I wanted to. But to Eleanor, the laws of physics and traffic were merely suggestions that applied to the poorer classes. I simply shook my head, pointed to the cars behind me, and gave her a polite shrug. The elderly woman finally backed out of the spot and drove away. I took my foot off the brake, rolled forward, and smoothly pulled into the spot, effectively forcing Eleanor to reverse her tank back into the main traffic lane. As I parked and turned off my engine, she pulled her vehicle up next to mine, rolling down her window. I rolled mine down just enough to hear her. "You absolute piece of trash," she shrieked, her voice a piercing frequency that probably sent local dogs running for cover. "I was waiting for that spot." "You were driving the wrong way down a one-way aisle," I replied calmly, "and there are literally 20 open spots in the next row." "Do you have any idea how much this car costs?" she demanded, aggressively tapping the steering wheel of her Mercedes. "It is worth more than your life. Move your garbage can before I have it towed." I stared at her for a long moment. I have been interrogated by cartel money launderers. I have sat across the table from hedge fund managers who have stolen billions of dollars. The shrill demands of an angry suburbanite barely registered on my heart rate monitor. "Have a wonderful day, ma'am," I said, rolling up my window, ignoring her continued screaming and walking into the store. I spent exactly 14 minutes inside. I bought the coffee beans. I bought a bottle of sparkling water. I walked back out into the bright afternoon sun, eager to go home, throw on some sweatpants, and watch bad television. When I reached my aisle, I stopped dead in my tracks. Eleanor had not found another parking spot. Instead, she had parked her massive white G-Wagon directly behind my Honda Civic, completely blocking me in. She was sitting in the driver's seat, engine idling, air conditioning blasting, scrolling through her phone. She had intentionally blocked me in as a punishment for taking the spot she believed was hers by divine right. I sighed. The deep, heavy sigh of a man who just wants to go home but knows he is about to have to deal with a human headache. I walked up to the driver's side window of her vehicle. She saw me approaching in her mirror, but she didn't roll down the window. She just looked at me through the glass with a smug, self-satisfied smirk. I tapped politely on the glass. She ignored me. I tapped again, slightly harder. She finally lowered the window about 2 inches. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone dripping with toxic sweetness. "You are blocking me in," I said. "I need to leave." "Oh, I am so sorry," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "I'm just waiting for my friend to come out of the store. I'll move when she gets here. You'll just have to wait." "There is no friend," I said. "You're just being petty because I took a parking spot. Move the vehicle, please." "Or what?" she challenged, her smirk widening. "Are you going to call the cops? Go ahead. By the time they get here, my friend will be back and I'll be gone. Just sit on the hood of your little gray shitbox and wait, peasant." She rolled the window back up. Now, a normal person might have started screaming. A normal person might have kicked her tire or slammed their hands on her hood. But like I said, I am a forensic accountant. I thrive on patience. I thrive on documentation. I walked back to my car, got in the driver's seat, started the engine, and turned on the air conditioning. I reached under the dashboard and pressed the small hidden button that activated the manual override for my surveillance system, ensuring that all 4 cameras were recording locally at maximum resolution in addition to the cloud backup. I put my car in reverse. I let my foot off the brake just enough to let my car creep backward until my rear bumper was exactly 1 inch away from the side of her vehicle. I didn't touch her car. I just got uncomfortably close. Then, I put my car in park, laid on the horn, and held my hand there. 1 solid, uninterrupted blast of the most obnoxious, tinny horn a 2009 Honda can produce. 10 seconds passed, 20 seconds, 30 seconds. People walking through the parking lot started stopping and staring. The noise was deafening. Inside her luxurious, sound-dampened cabin, Eleanor could definitely hear it. I watched her through my rearview mirror. Her smug smile vanished, replaced by an expression of pure, unadulterated fury. She slammed her hands against her steering wheel. She threw her phone onto the passenger seat. She was losing her mind. She threw her G-Wagon into drive and pulled forward about 10 feet, clearing the path behind me. She was finally moving. I took my hand off the horn. The sudden silence in the parking lot was beautiful. I put my car in reverse, backed out of the spot smoothly, and shifted into drive. I started to drive past her to head toward the exit. And that is when the rational part of Eleanor's brain simply ceased to exist. As I drove past her, driving at maybe 3 miles per hour, she suddenly cut the steering wheel hard to the left, threw her car in reverse, and slammed her foot on the gas pedal. The physics of a 6,000-pound tank accelerating directly into a lightweight commuter sedan are brutal. Her heavy rear bumper slammed squarely into the front right quarter panel and hood of my Civic. The sound of crunching metal, shattering plastic, and breaking glass echoed across the entire grocery store parking lot. My car violently shook from the impact. My coffee beans flew off the passenger seat and hit the floorboards. I slammed on my brakes, putting the car in park. My heart was pounding, but my training immediately kicked in. Assess the situation. No injuries. Airbags did not deploy because the impact was from the side and at a relatively low speed, but the structural damage to my car was significant. The hood was buckled upward. The headlight assembly was entirely pulverized. Before I could even unbuckle my seatbelt, Eleanor's driver's side door flew open. This is where the true performance began. The moment her feet hit the pavement, she let out a blood-curdling scream. It was the kind of scream you would expect from someone who just witnessed a gruesome murder. She stumbled away from her vehicle, dramatically threw her hands in the air, and then collapsed onto the asphalt, right in the middle of the parking aisle. "My neck!" she wailed, her voice carrying over the tops of the parked cars. "Oh my God, my neck! He hit me! He hit me on purpose!" I sat in my car for a moment, genuinely stunned by the audacity. I slowly opened my door and stepped out. By now, a crowd was forming. Shoppers were abandoning their carts. People were pulling out their cell phones, already recording. A guy wearing a Patagonia fleece vest and boat shoes immediately sprinted over to her, dropping to his knees. Let's call him Bryce. Bryce looked like he worked in middle management at a marketing firm and had been waiting his entire life for a moment to play the hero. "Ma'am, don't move," Bryce said, projecting his voice for the audience. "Keep your spine perfectly straight. I am certified in wilderness first aid." Eleanor looked up at Bryce, tears streaming down her face. Genuine tears. The woman could cry on command. "I was just trying to leave," she sobbed. "I was just trying to back out, and this maniac in that horrible gray car just accelerated right into me. He rammed me. I think my spine is fractured." Bryce whipped his head around and glared at me. "Are you insane, man?" he yelled. "Look what you did to her." I walked over to the point of impact. The heavy steel bumper of her G-Wagon had a minor scuff on the plastic trim. My car looked like it had been hit by a wrecking ball. I looked down at Eleanor, who was lying on the ground clutching her neck. "Are you seriously doing this?" I asked, keeping my voice perfectly calm. That was when she paused her crying just long enough to drop the mask. She looked at me, made direct eye contact, and hissed the words that sealed her fate. "People like you are why my husband pays for premium lawyers, sweetheart. You're going to pay for my new bumper, and you're going to buy me a new house when I sue you for whiplash." Then she immediately went back to wailing. I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. It was the kind of peace that only comes when you realize the person you are dealing with has handed you the exact shovel they are going to use to dig their own grave. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I simply took a step back, leaned against the uncrumpled side of my car, and crossed my arms. "Someone call 911, Bryce barked at the crowd. "Tell them we have a serious traffic collision with a potential spinal injury, and get the police here. This guy is a menace." "I'll wait right here," I said mildly. The next 15 minutes were a circus. A fire truck arrived first, followed by an ambulance. The paramedics brought out a backboard and a neck brace. They carefully loaded Eleanor onto the stretcher while she continuously whimpered and complained about numbness in her fingers. The crowd watched with bated breath, whispering among themselves, casting disgusted glances in my direction. I was the villain in their afternoon matinee. I was the unhinged maniac in the ugly car who had brutally assaulted a defenseless woman. Then the police arrived. A single cruiser pulled up, lights flashing. Out stepped Officer Rookie. He looked to be about 22 years old, sporting a high and tight haircut and tactical sunglasses that were entirely unnecessary for a cloudy afternoon. He walked with that exaggerated swagger of a guy who had just gotten the badge and was desperate to use his authority. He went straight to the ambulance, where Eleanor was sitting up on the stretcher, the neck brace securely fastened. She immediately began spinning her web. She told him how I had stolen her parking spot, aggressively honked at her, threatened her, and then intentionally rammed my car into hers as she was peacefully trying to back out of her space. Officer Rookie dutifully wrote all of this down in his little notepad. He then interviewed Bryce, who eagerly corroborated her story, despite the fact that Bryce had been inside the store buying artisanal cheese when the actual collision occurred. "I didn't see the crash itself," Bryce told the officer, puffing out his chest. "But I heard the impact, and when I ran out, this guy was standing over her, looking aggressive. It's clear what happened. He's driving a total junker. He probably doesn't even have insurance. He was using his car as a weapon." Officer Rookie nodded solemnly, closed his notepad, and finally walked over to me. He did not look happy. "License, registration, and proof of insurance," he demanded, holding out his hand. No greeting. No asking for my side of the story. He had already made up his mind. I reached into my back pocket and pulled out my wallet. I specifically kept my driver's license in a front slot, away from my credentials, just for situations like this. I handed him my civilian driver's license, my perfectly valid insurance card, and the registration. "Do you want to explain to me why you decided to ram your vehicle into that woman's car?" he asked, his tone dripping with condescension. "I didn't ram her car," I said politely. "I was driving past her. She deliberately reversed her vehicle into the side of my car. It was an intentional act." Officer Rookie scoffed, an actual, audible scoff. "Right. So she just decided to back a $100,000 Mercedes into your... What even is this? A 2009 Civic? Because that makes perfect sense. People do strange things when they are angry about parking spots," I replied. "Save it," he snapped. "I have a witness who says you were acting aggressively. I have a victim with a neck injury. The physical evidence shows the front of your car hit the rear of hers. That's a classic rear-end collision. You're at fault. I'm citing you for reckless driving, failure to maintain a safe distance, and I'm impounding your vehicle. You're lucky I'm not arresting you for vehicular assault." I nodded slowly. "Officer, I strongly advise you to investigate a little further before you finalize that report. Are you absolutely certain you want to write this up as my fault? Have you asked to see the security cameras from the front of the grocery store?" I don't need you to tell me how to do my job, he growled, stepping closer, trying to use his physical presence to intimidate me. The store cameras point at the doors, not the parking lot. I already checked. You're nailed, buddy. Just as things were getting interesting, a sleek black Porsche Panamera pulled into the parking lot, tires squealing, and parked illegally in the fire lane. A man jumped out. He was wearing a tailored Italian suit, no tie, the top 2 buttons of his shirt undone. He had perfectly coiffed hair and a Rolex Daytona on his wrist that cost more than a starter home. He looked exactly like a guy named Richard. Richard sprinted over to the ambulance. "Eleanor! Oh my God, baby, are you okay?" Eleanor started crying again. "Richard, it hurts so bad. That maniac hit me." Richard turned around, his face purple with rage. He spotted me standing by my car with Officer Rookie. He marched over, invading my personal space, pointing a manicured finger directly at my chest. "You listen to me, you piece of garbage," Richard shouted, spit flying from his lips. "I am a senior partner at the largest civil litigation firm in this state. You just hit my wife. You just damaged my property. By the time I am done with you, you won't even own the clothes on your back. I am going to garnish your wages for the rest of your miserable life. I am going to take everything you have." I looked at Richard. I looked at the screaming Eleanor in her neck brace. I looked at Officer Rookie, who was standing there with a smug grin, clearly enjoying watching a rich guy tear into a poor guy. "Sir," I said to Richard, keeping my voice incredibly soft, "are you absolutely sure you want to pursue legal action regarding this incident?" "Pursue it?" Richard laughed maniacally. "I'm not just going to pursue it. I'm going to ruin you. I'm calling my insurance company right now to report a total loss on the G-Wagon, and I'm filing a $1 million personal injury lawsuit before the sun goes down." "Okay," I said. I turned to Officer Rookie. "And you, officer? You are officially filing a police report stating that I am at fault for this collision, based entirely on the testimony of the driver and a witness who did not see the crash." "That's exactly what I'm doing," Officer Rookie said, ripping a yellow citation from his pad and shoving it against my chest. "Sign here to acknowledge receipt of the citations." I took the pen. I signed the citations. I handed the pad back to him. Then I reached into my back pocket one more time. "Since the official report has now been filed," I said, my voice dropping an octave, "and the intent to defraud an insurance company has been verbally declared in front of witnesses, I think it's time we elevate this conversation." I pulled out my leather credential case. I flipped it open. The heavy gold shield of the Federal Bureau of Investigation caught the afternoon sunlight. Opposite the badge was my photo identification, declaring my status as a special agent. The silence that fell over the group was absolute. It was the kind of profound, heavy silence that happens just before a bomb goes off. Officer Rookie stared at the badge. His eyes darted from the gold shield to my face, then back to the shield. The smug grin slid off his face so fast it almost left friction burns. The color drained from his cheeks. Richard froze mid-breath. His finger, which had been pointing at my chest, slowly lowered to his side. "Officer," I said, keeping my badge held out for him to read clearly. "My name is Special Agent Marcus. I work in the Financial Crimes and Fraud Division. You have just falsified a police report. This man has just declared his intent to commit insurance fraud. And his wife, who is currently putting on a masterclass in community theater over there in the ambulance, is about to be charged with a laundry list of felonies." You're a Fed?" Officer Rookie stammered, taking a step backward. "Why didn't you say something? Why are you driving that piece of crap?" "Because my vehicle is currently part of an active, ongoing surveillance apparatus," I lied smoothly. Well, it was a half-lie. Which brings me to my next point. You claimed you had all the evidence you needed. You didn't. I walked over to the passenger side of my crushed Honda. Reaching through the open window, I popped the glove box. I pulled out a heavy, ruggedized laptop. I set it right on the crumpled hood of my car and booted it up. "Step over here, officer," I commanded. It wasn't a request. It was an order from a federal agent to a local beat cop, and he knew it. He scurried over like a scolded dog. Richard, unable to help himself, slowly walked over to look at the screen as well. I opened the video playback software. I selected the file from 5 minutes ago. I hit play. The screen split into 4 high-definition angles: the front camera, the rear camera, and both side mirrors. The audio was crystal clear. First, the video showed my car driving slowly past Eleanor's parked G-Wagon. It showed the clear, empty space in front of me. It showed her steering wheel cut sharply to the left. It showed her reverse lights illuminate. And then, in glorious 4K resolution at 60 frames per second, it showed her aggressively slamming the accelerator and reversing directly into my car. But the video didn't stop there. Because my microphones were highly sensitive, the playback captured the exact moment I stepped out of the car. It captured her dropping to the ground, and then, loud and clear, echoing out of the laptop speakers for Officer Rookie and Richard to hear, came Eleanor's voice. "People like you are why my husband pays for premium lawyers, sweetheart. You're going to pay for my new bumper, and you're going to buy me a new house when I sue you for whiplash." I paused the video. I looked at Richard. The man looked like he was about to vomit. His expensive tan had faded to an ashen gray. He was a lawyer. He knew exactly what he was looking at. He was looking at premeditated, intentional property damage, filing a false police report, and conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. "Now, Richard," I said, leaning casually against the crushed hood of my car. "You mentioned you were a senior partner at a civil litigation firm. I'm sure the State Bar Association will be incredibly interested in a sworn police report where you attempt to extort a federal agent. I'm also sure your insurance company will be fascinated to know that you intentionally filed a fraudulent claim on a vehicle valued at over $150,000. Richard couldn't speak. His mouth opened and closed like a fish suffocating on a dock. I turned my attention to Officer Rookie. "Tear up the citations." He frantically ripped the yellow copies out of his book and crumpled them in his fist. "Good," I said. "Now go to your radio. Request a supervisor. A captain, ideally. Then, I want you to walk over to that ambulance, inform the paramedics that the patient is entirely uninjured, and place her under arrest for filing a false police report and malicious destruction of property. If you do not do exactly as I say, I will have my local field office pull the body camera footage of this entire interaction, and I will personally see to it that you are bagging groceries for a living by the end of the month." Officer Rookie swallowed hard. "Yes, sir." He turned and practically sprinted back to his cruiser to get his supervisor on the radio. I looked back at Richard. "You might want to call one of those premium lawyers your wife was bragging about, because her problems are no longer local. Since her insurance carrier is headquartered in another state, the fraudulent claim she initiated over her cell phone constitutes wire fraud, and that makes it a federal jurisdiction." "My jurisdiction?" Richard didn't argue. He didn't yell. He turned around, walked numbly back to his illegally parked Porsche, got inside, and shut the door. He didn't leave, but he completely abandoned his wife to face the music alone. When Officer Rookie walked up to the ambulance with his handcuffs drawn, Eleanor was still playing the victim. She saw him approaching and started wailing louder. "Officer, tell me you arrested him," she cried. "Tell me that psycho is going to jail." "Ma'am, please step out of the ambulance," Officer Rookie said, his voice completely devoid of the swagger he had 5 minutes ago. "I can't move," she shrieked. "My spine." "Ma'am, we have high-definition video of the entire incident," the officer said loudly, making sure the crowd could hear. "We heard the audio of you threatening the other driver. Get off the stretcher. You are under arrest." The transformation was miraculous. The paralyzing spinal injury vanished instantly. Eleanor ripped the Velcro neck brace off and threw it at the paramedic. She scrambled off the stretcher, her face twisted in rage. "You can't arrest me," she screamed. "Do you know who my husband is? Richard! Richard, do something!" She looked over at the Porsche. Richard was sitting in the driver's seat, staring straight ahead, actively ignoring her. He was already doing the mental math on how much this divorce was going to cost him. Officer Rookie grabbed her arm, spun her around, and snapped the heavy steel handcuffs onto her wrists. She kicked, she fought, she screamed profanities that would make a sailor blush. The crowd, the same crowd that had been looking at me like a monster 10 minutes ago, was now recording her spectacular meltdown with absolute glee. Bryce, the wilderness first aid hero in the Patagonia fleece, had quietly melted away into the bushes, nowhere to be found. They dragged her to the back of the cruiser and shoved her inside. 10 minutes later, a police captain arrived. He was a seasoned veteran who took one look at my credentials, watched the video on my laptop, and immediately apologized for his rookie's behavior. He assured me the local charges against Eleanor would be airtight. I thanked him, gave him a copy of the video file on a flash drive, and waited for a tow truck to arrive to haul my battered Honda to an approved body shop. I stood on the curb, drinking a lukewarm cup of coffee I had purchased from a gas station across the street, watching the flashing lights of the police cruiser as it drove away, taking Eleanor to a holding cell. The aftermath of that afternoon was a thing of administrative beauty. Because I am petty, and because I loathe bullies, I did not just let the local police handle it. I took the case file to work the next morning. I handed it to a prosecutor friend of mine in the federal building. We pulled her financial records. We pulled Richard's financial records. It turns out, people who are arrogant enough to casually commit insurance fraud in a grocery store parking lot are usually arrogant enough to commit tax fraud too. The federal audit tore through their lives like a hurricane. Richard's law firm quietly forced him to resign to avoid the negative publicity. The insurance company not only dropped them, but filed a massive civil suit to recover payouts from 2 previous accidents Eleanor had claimed over the last 4 years. Accidents that suddenly looked incredibly suspicious in light of my dashcam footage. Eleanor faced 3 felony charges. She pleaded down to avoid prison time, but the plea deal came with a staggering amount of restitution, community service, and a permanent felony record that barred her from ever serving on the board of her precious Neighborhood Homeowners Association again. The federal government seized the G-Wagon under civil asset forfeiture laws, deeming it an instrument used in the commission of wire fraud. They lost the house. They lost the cars. Richard filed for divorce 6 months later, claiming Eleanor's reckless actions had destroyed his career. As for me, the insurance payout on my 2009 Honda Civic was surprisingly generous. The car was totaled, structurally ruined by the impact. I took the check, went on a popular used car website, and bought the exact same make and model. A 2011 Honda Civic. Color: fading despair gray. I spent a weekend in my garage, carefully reinstalling the cameras, the hidden microphones, and the secondary battery system. I gave it a fresh coat of cheap wax, stepped back, and admired my work. It looked like absolute garbage. It was perfect. I still go to that organic grocery store every Sunday. I still buy my coffee beans. I still drive exactly the speed limit down the parking aisles. And every single time I see a pristine white luxury SUV driving aggressively through the lot, I just smile, tap the hidden record button under my dashboard, and wait. Because there is always another Eleanor out there, and I have nothing but time.